Welcome to the next episode of Next Creators. Today we have Michael, or Ozymandias, and Fred from Open Forest Protocol. Thank you for joining.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I know Michael from his many different other types of work in your ecosystem through Nskilled, Move Capital. I heard a couple of times about Open Forest Protocol, and today would be, I never met Fred yet, and today would be a really great opportunity to learn about how you guys met and how did you start working on this? What are some of the challenges with working in this industry? So maybe we can start with a brief overview of how you guys met and what is Open Forest Protocol.
Yeah, sounds great. Fred, do you want to take it from your side first, or I can take it from mine? Up to you.
Yeah, no, I'll do it. So yeah, my background being in science, always interested in forest as a whole, trees. I started an NGO in 2017-18 called On a Mission with my co-founder Aurélien, where we had the aim, and we're still doing that, of supporting sustainable reforestation projects. So we found out that when we reached out to projects, started helping them getting funded, but also getting them being more consistent about how they report their work on the ground, we found that they were not able to access carbon finance, and that the reporting was pretty much lacking in terms of consistency, accuracy. So with that in mind, we actually trying to find a solution to that problem that would be addressing those two issues, but also the scaling issue that they were facing. Talked to a few people in the blockchain industry, and one of them introduced me to Mike to actually discuss on how we could do this. And Mike had a few ideas, and actually was already working on this specific idea already. So that happened. The connection happened in 2020, and we've been working on making this real and accessible to all since then.
Yeah, so maybe just to add to that, I can kind of pretty cool to say that like OFP and the founding of the team was a super serendipitous, bizarre 1 in a billion chance that these two like different backgrounds would like meet, get along, and be like excited about building this product in the future. So I'm coming from crypto, been in this space since early 2017, and after the last market crash, was doing kind of a little bit of poking around with different use cases for blockchain, different potential architectures of solutions. Granted that the products were still quite limited, right? This is like NFTs are just becoming a thing. DAOs really aren't a thing. There's not a lot of cheap chains to use, et cetera, et cetera. But I was approached by a professor who was doing a project with the World Bank, and they were basically trying to find a financing mechanism for verifiable reforestation over a long period of time. So the problem would be that, a government like Pakistan would request, $300 million for a reforestation campaign. And then 5 years later, no one would know what happened to the money, and no one would know what happened or if the trees got in the ground. Right. So that was like a group, including Christopher Marsh's from the Center for International Forestry Research. And we basically kind of like kicked this solution along for a couple of years, but we were really missing someone from the forest side who had, deep, knowledge of the day-to-day operations of how you manage these projects, what data is required, how the carbon markets work, et cetera, et cetera. So it was essentially shelved. And then I got, just by happenstance, entrepreneur friend of mine in Switzerland said, "Hey, do you still have that old, paper you had been working on with reforestation? I have a friend who's interested in trying to scale it with blockchain." And we just got connected, and this was in October of 2020, and that's when we were like, "Oh, nice! Like, you fit the missing piece that I needed, and I fit the missing piece that you needed, and let's create a team and do this."
That's amazing. Yeah, that sounds extremely like happen chance, kind of serendipitous. I'm also curious, how did you Fred, come to the realization that blockchain might be somehow related to
Yeah, there's a nice story to that, actually. I was interested in blockchain like everyone because of the tech side of things. So I attended a few actually conferences and a few startup pitches, I think, in Switzerland. And that was in 2015, around that time. And I walked out of those conferences always telling myself, this is, I don't really understand why there is something happening in that space. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't see any real world application because I wasn't, coming from the DeFi space. So I was like, how can we apply this to the real world? And I wasn't seeing anything. So it was like discarding this and, but somehow my mind, by discarding it, was also, working in the background kind of thing, in the back end, saying, well, actually there is something. People are interested. I'm seeing more and more people talking about this. I have a few friends actually working in that space. It should be serious, And then, with time coming back to it, I was like, I think blockchain can be used for basically a coordination mechanism. I think that's really the essence of it. So, just curious, how can we apply it to real concrete world problems? And it happened that, the first kind of real proposition I had into my hands related to what I was doing was a proposition coming from Mike, and was like, okay, if that is going to work, that is a game changer, a real game changer. So we have to give it a try.
Mm-hmm. And for Michael, like when you discussed this for the first time with Fred, did you guys have like a pretty quickly solution, like first version of solution in mind, or was it kind of like very long iterative process of like just getting to know each other as well as getting to figure out how these two worlds connect?
Yeah, so the second element of serendipity actually has to do with the solution of OFP, which originally in the original conception, so 2017, 2018, 2019, we were basically just thinking of a relatively one-dimensional Dapp where a user collects data, hashes it on chain, and then can show to a prospective person, that their data has been recorded on chain in a pretty simple manner. In the fall of 2020, I started working with the Flux protocol team, Flux Oracle team, Peter and Jasper. And at the time, it was a prediction market. And at the time, we were working on the mechanics of the Flux Oracle, going through how does decentralized validation work? Like, what's the theory behind resolving a prediction market, in order to, in a decentralized way, so that it can kind of just run like a machine. And that actually was just the lucky, again, time and place, like looking at that, those different papers that they were working on, that we were working on with them, and thinking, we can actually modify this in a couple of key parameters to fit forests and forest timeframes better, right? So like with a prediction market, you're trying to resolve as fast as possible because you're trying to move on to the next potential market that's set up. Well, with forests, we can tweak a little bit about who's allowed to validate, a little bit about the validation structure, and then just expand the time frame for validation to fit this solution in a better way. And I think that was also kind of the essence of Discovery. If I had not been working with the Flux team, I don't actually think we would have designed the solution like as a protocol. It probably would have just been a Dapp, a one-off Dapp of how was it kind of originally envisioned.
Interesting. So from figuring out prediction markets, oracles, you connected it to this world.
Yep, the validation mechanism. That's really the key. Is how can you what's the word that you used, Fred? Coordinate. How do you enable kind of coordination of people on chain to enact decisions on data that's coming in that might not be, that's coming in from off chain places, so to speak. Yeah.
I know maybe for listeners also would be useful to understand from the kind of from the higher level, to kind of double down a little bit in those problems that exist today in forestation projects, right? Maybe Fred, you can like go deeper on each one of those, and how do you guys planning to tackle them?
Yeah, sure. Basically, in this space today, the main problem being, it's opaque. It's people don't understand what's happening, but it's because, if you are a project on the ground trying to, use an MRV tool and get access to carbon finance, generating carbon credits, you have the path ahead of you is really complicated. You need, a consulting companies that is going to help you, make a statement about the project, create a report about what you want to do, set up the monitoring. You need a standard certification body that is going to look into your project. You also need probably someone in the carbon space, a broker, someone who will actually buy the carbon eventually. So you have a complex setup, and it's really hard to navigate that system. And on top of being hard, it's also almost impossible to say, and to be honest, actually, it's impossible to do that if you're a small project or a small, medium-sized project, because you don't have the resources to do it. So, and I think that's where blockchain really has its value, and not only for us, but for the future, is, taking a very complex process and making it streamlined. So it's a coordination mechanism for complex processes, what we are building. Very, very much centric on, forestation aspect, but you could think about deploying that to other activities. And I think it's really the only value proposition is that of course, we have the decentralized MRV system. We have a lot of other things around it, but being able to make this into a coordination system where people on the ground do something, people funding people on the ground understand what they do, really trust the system, trust the people, trust the work of the people on the ground is basically what we're building.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about the solution, it sounds like there are multiple pieces to it, right? Are you going to be tackling one problem at a time? What are you focusing on first, and then what's the harder one to tackle after?
We have to tackle them all at once, because it's the only way the system is going to function. I would say that we have different products coming up, and the one we should really explain is the core system of what we build is the MRV system, consisting of 3 products. And on top of these MRV systems or system, you can have other things developing, the finance mechanism. So but you have to, and Michael is probably ready to explain that. You have to know ahead of time how you're going to deploy the system. Of course, the MRV is centric, but then of course you have the plan already to know how you're going to plug in the finance, plug in all the things.
Mm-hmm. And for audience, so they understand what is MRV for them.
So yeah, MRV relates to measurement, reporting, and verification. And basically what we build is a set of 3 products. So the first product is basically a dashboard, a Web2 interface dashboard for people of projects on the ground to register to. That's where the metadata of the product is going to be stored, basically through this dashboard. So the location of the project, what they're going to do, what type of trees they're going to plant, any other metadata is going to be there. Then this dashboard will allow you to assign the field agents to do the monitoring on the ground. And the monitoring is basically reporting trees data in different sample zones, or sample plots as we call them, regularly. So it's every 6 months for the first 2 years, and then every year thereafter. And so this is going to be done through another product, which is an app that you can use as a field agent on the field to gather this data. And of course, when you come back from the field, this data is going to be uploaded to the dashboard. And then from the dashboard, you can send the data for validation. And that's the third product, which is basically the validation dashboard. And a validator in our OFP lens is a company that has knowledge about what happens in the forest. And those validators will look at the data and basically accept or deny the data based on previous data set. So, a data set of a forest is basically seeing when the forest has been planted and how it grows over years. So it's quite easy to spot anomalies, and that's their role through this dashboard.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add to that and explain it from like a 1,000-foot view, like we look at OFP as a system overhaul of the way that forestation is currently done today. And when you're talking on a system level, you're actually killing multiple birds with one stone, so to speak, assuming you can get the new system in place and turning and moving. So just to kind of give some examples, what Fred just described is what we refer to as the core engine of the system. It's basically where you connect the projects on the ground and their capacity to upload data onto the protocol in order to get, confirmation or denial that the data is accurate. A project will do that for the life cycle of their project. So when they create their project, they're uploading data every 6 months for the first 2 years, and then every year thereafter for the full life cycle of the project, right? So like that brings that necessary durability and reliability to this system, right? Now it gets really fun because, okay, we have a mechanism running of projects uploading data getting accepted or denied, projects going back to the field, uploading more data. Now we can talk about layering it. Let's add in a back-end carbon methodology to generate carbon credits if the project's data that's uploaded is affirmed. Let's implement a financing platform to release funds to projects if their data upload is affirmed or in the event that it's denied under certain conditions. Let's create a value cascade where if the project is employing indigenous community members, when the data upload is affirmed and the carbon credit is created, the credits go directly to the indigenous community members who are in the field collecting data instead of being bottlenecked through some type of consultant or some type of middleman, so to speak. So I think like understanding OFP from this systematic overview basically allows us to invert a lot of how traditional reforestation has been done, right? As Fred said, traditional reforestation is opaque. With OFP, we make it open. Traditional reforestation is disparate. You don't upload data on a routine basis. It can be, every 3 years, every 5 years. Sometimes it falls off at the end. With OFP, it's timely. There's no life cycle guarantee for existing projects. With OFP, there's full life cycle guarantees. The existing system is binary. So it's between a consultant and an individual project, and then the consultant will help the project access the market. With OFP, it's systematic, where it's a collaborative effort, and the value is held on the protocol and instead of held in a specific silo of sorts. So it's lots of things kind of ushering a changing system, but all built around that core engine that Fred just described.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are the biggest challenges from your perspective? Is it on technology side or in a product, or is it more on the market adoption, kind of like implementing the system?
What do you think, Fred?
Yeah, I think the challenges is education, basically. Education about what we do, because doing something, at the intersection of two industries that are quite complex to understand is even more difficult. So I think our challenge is to get the message across to projects. And obviously, we don't really need to focus too much on the blockchain aspect because they'll be onboarded, quite easily with the near account model. They won't even really know that it's blockchain backed. They don't need to know that, and eventually they will get there because they will be interested and to learn how it works. So there is some indication about why they need to, or that they don't need. They have the advantage to actually use a solution like that. Obviously, they usually get that pretty easily because it's community-based, and most of those projects, in those areas are community-based. So they really understand that approach, and they like it because it's not, centric, and they own their data. So it's the education is coming along really well, but it's time-consuming. You still need to educate. On the other side, I think we've started our project with quite a heavy blockchain crypto angle, and then we need to educate the climate tech people on how we actually apply this solution, how we do it. We do apply blockchain as a tool into this coordination, and why it's actually needed to actually make this coordination mechanism efficient. And basically there, the education is about blockchain. I know lots of people are still thinking about Bitcoin is bad for the environment, and that's where they are. So there's still a long way to get to, okay, what is near, it's proof of stake, yeah, okay, it's climate neutral, and it's consuming very little energy, and it can be used for doing this and that and this. So yeah, I think that's the main challenge in my perspective. Maybe Mike, you have another view on that.
I think you nailed it. I mean, the simple version is that the crypto funds don't understand climate and specifically the future development of the carbon market. We've had a couple of calls with top tier funds that have said so what's this whole thing about carbon? Like we don't understand anything about it, the value behind the asset, why it matters, and what the value proposition of a protocol that allows you to yield carbon. Why does that matter? And then you go to the climate side, and the climate side saying, how does a token work? Does a token give us equity in your company? How does the token operate? And you got to explain to them, no, this is a protocol play. So your token is basically your access to the utilities that it provides on the protocol, and these are the different utilities. But there's no entity that's coordinating this as a whole. It's a communal effort. Those two bottlenecks, I think, have made it pretty difficult. But the good news is that time is on our side insofar as as people get more aware of the climate, they're more interested in climate solutions. And as crypto, metaphorically eats the world continuously more and more and more, people are more aware of crypto as well. So I think we're in the right position. It's just, a question of when does this stuff come to hit, the mainstream in the way we need it to.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about crypto too, Michael, you've been in crypto for a while. Like, how do you think about where we are in adoption of crypto? Your use case is very different from what majority of people do in crypto, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about that?
Yeah. How do I think about the current state of us? I think we're consolidating before the next leg up, so to speak. And I think actually the next leg up is going to be probably the biggest one yet, because the tooling is so much better now. So like refi as a whole, really sprung up in the last year and a half. And a lot of the strength in refi, beyond providing market infrastructure for carbon and MRV/data plays, DAOs are a pretty big role in this, right? The concept, what you see with Constitution DAO. Well, the whole idea of pooling resources to regeneratively finance different projects around the world, or to acquire land, to steward the land in a better way, et cetera, et cetera. That's just a small example of something that would have been pretty impossible 3 years ago, and all of a sudden it's mainstream, and you can spin it up in a week today, for all said and done. I think if we're really going to get our super imaginative hats on, the next wave up is going to see a lot of basically the benefits of composability will be felt. So you'll be able to build a metaverse project or a game where the metaverse project or the game has some nature-based component that harmonizes with a real forest in the real world connected through OFP, and watering your plants in the game actually results in sending small amount of fees to a real forest project in the world. So for people who are pessimistic, the short term might suck just because of market conditions and other things, but the long-term promise of composable ecosystems and all the different solutions kind of harmonizing with each other, I think it's going to break a lot of people's heads. That's possible. Yes, that's possible. Yeah. It's coming. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's the way forward. Kind of bridging the digital world with the natural world, in the sense that we're using technology to give value to nature and what's around us, what actually matters to not us as specific people, but as humanity. I think that is really powerful, and not only powerful, but it's doable. I mean, we have the tools today to do that, and we're just going to prove that it's possible to do, and hopefully it's going to inspire lots of other people to think about this and trying to be innovative in that way.
Yeah. I was wondering also, when it comes to this year, we're roughly in the middle of the year, what are the main things that you're focusing on right now?
Yeah. So I can kind of take it from the product friend, and maybe you can mention things like Gorky and other larger kind of goals. So product is we have Mainnet coming out in about a week, a little over a week, is when what Mainnet means is, thanks again to forest timelines, is Mainnet means that the forest projects are able to onboard to the protocol and start uploading their data. Now, because they only upload data every 6 months, the second phase of Mainnet is when the data will get validated 6 months from July 22nd. So essentially, really, really short term, we're onboarding the projects that we've been recruiting for the last year and a half, and giving them the tools to start uploading their data. In the medium term, we're finalizing the validation infrastructure and then looking towards essentially the more financial components of the protocol to implement early next year. I don't know, Fred, if you'd add anything on top of that for projects, governments we're working with, so on and so forth.
No, that's it. We are very project. We are, of course, really tech oriented, but also very project centric. So there's a lot of work on our side and for the team to be, talking to projects, onboarding them, making sure they are, everything is running smoothly. They understand what they're doing. They're committed for the long term. They're, real projects doing better with the right intentions. So yeah, that's coming. It's a few weeks away. It seems a bit incredible because we've been really working hard on this and really focusing on making a super good product. So it's super exciting.
That's cool. And to the extent that you can share how many projects you're launching with, how do you engage with the projects normally?
Yeah, so we have roughly 50 projects committed to use OFP at this time. We've made a kind of, I would say, pre-selection, even if the word is not right, but we have 15 projects that we will work closely with to onboard, and then slowly, reaching out to all others, and hopefully that will work well and we'll attract more projects. The way we've been reaching out to projects is on a, quite close contact. Reaching out to specific projects we think are eligible or would be interested in our solution, and then discussing with them. So setting up calls and explaining what we do, get them interested, see if there is a fit, and then eventually, having them onboarded or committed to use OFP. That's how we've been working, and we will continue that because our strategy on deploying. For the moment, we have roughly 5 persons in different countries. Of course, we'll need more boots on the ground because when you talk about projects, you really need to talk locally. You need to understand what's happening in the at the local level, who are the people involved, how they do it, how we can assist. There's also the coordination with the government in many cases. So it's at the same time global, but also very local when you come down to project.
Yeah, and maybe if I can also add a little bit on the magnitude of the potential market that we're talking about here. So, unlocking the faucet on sustainable and full life cycle reforestation would have a potential hectare market of over 900 million hectares of land globally that could be put to use for reforestation projects. If we talk about other verticals like conservation land or mangroves or things like that, we're looking at over 1.3 or 1.4 billion hectares of land that could, eventually need some type of sustainable regeneration or preservation or reforestation alongside it. And on a very kind of concrete national level, governments are defining strategies for how they're going to achieve these goals with their land. So, at the beginning, this started with the government of Pakistan, in my experience, but, working with the government of Ivory Coast right now, they're interested in doing a pilot project with OFP as a kind of a proof of concept from which the kind of implication would be they would be expanding large amounts of their land to, OFP based reforestation. So we're at the really, really beginning of this dialogue, if you will, where governments are waking up to the fact that they are setting targets for conservation land, whether it's the 30% by 2030 or massive reforestation campaigns of hundreds of millions of trees. And then when they turn to the private market, they're basically saying, okay, what's available for us to use? And that's where we're hoping to bring, a open, communal, systematized approach to this problem instead of an individual siloed one.
Mm-hmm. And what is the main problem on their side when it comes to existing solutions? Is it the same kinds of things we discussed, like reporting is one of the key ones because they want to hit their goals, but they probably have no idea how they're doing against those goals, right? Or is it something else?
Yeah, well, I think every country is very specific, but based on the discussions we had, I would say that their concern is really about the transparency because in this market today, you have a lot of private actors doing private things. So you would not necessarily, as a government, you would not necessarily be aware of who is doing what where. And that's probably one of the biggest issues that they're running into because they have no tools, no ways of actually getting knowledge about this market. So, of course, a transparent, open way is very good for them because they'll be they'll be able to see what's happening and who is doing what where. And I think that's completely beneficial for the whole industry, because it's going to be beneficial for the people that are actually implementing projects, saying, this is completely transparent. It's completely, the data is verifiable, has been verified in a decentralized way. On top of that, the government is aware. Maybe the government is, also getting a small share of the benefit in that case. So yeah, I think that's the value proposition. I'm not sure all the governments around the world will actually like that, but some are actually looking into this as a very promising solution.
I think another really often overlooked value proposition is the notion of like ownership or autonomy on a national level of the stakeholders who are involved in regenerating or conserving their land. So in the existing scale of solutions today, you're essentially bringing in an external consultant. You're paying them large amounts of money. They're looking at your land on a siloed per basis, and then you're basically paying them to do this for the land that you're actively trying to monetize or conserve or do something in that sense. With OFP, we invert that whole paradigm. So with OFP, it's your land. You're collecting data for it. You're uploading data on a repeatable basis to a network. And from that, the network is providing value directly to you. There's no fee at all to get started. You're not paying anything to get off the ground. And I think that notion of, we have the freedom to control our own destiny. We're not reliant on a middleman, or we're not reliant on a consultant to be on time to check things out, or to make payments to them to do this. On a larger time scale, I think that we will be quite successful with that value proposition.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think things will evolve in the next couple of years? To the extent you can predict, it's really hard to know how things will go, but how do you think about that?
It's hard to answer. Hopefully it's going to be us being a really strong value proposition, and we'll go towards people getting interested in solutions like that, understanding blockchain, getting interested and moving over to a new system. I'm actually quite confident this is going to happen on the project level. We've had lots of interest from other project levels, so I think that's going to happen. The question is, on the governmental side, that is harder to say, because the timeline is not the same. It takes longer. So where we will stand there, it's hard to say. Hopefully, we'll have a few governments going down that route and being interested, and I totally see that happening. I don't think the whole market is going to shift overnight or in a few years. Probably, the standards of the world will still be there, and there'll be a multiple way of actually doing projects.
Yeah, but I think for the industry cluster of what we would be working on, which would be nature-based carbon, I think that has a very bright future, and I think that there's going to be a copious amount of interest in creating nature-based carbon projects going forward, and that's largely, I think, determined by the macro. A stalled energy transition, the war in Russia, Ukraine, energy crisis in Europe, so on and so forth. Climate change goals are not going to be, hopefully not going to be completely thrown to the wayside. People are just going to have to start looking for alternatives. And one of the easiest and most reliable alternatives is when you're dealing with nature, and when you just have to coordinate getting the project and keeping the project in the ground instead of putting money into something else. So quite bullish on nature-based carbon, nature-based solutions as a whole. The question is, when will the market wake up to this, and if there's government top-down pressure, or if there's consumer bottom-up pressure, and what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious when it comes to geographical differences. Do you see any trends when it comes to particular geographies really keyed on this and really focused on solutions, and then there are some other areas maybe they're a bit more laggard or something like this, or it's kind of all over the place?
No, I think the difference is really linked to technological adoption potential. We see countries that are really keen on adopting new technologies. And when I refer to countries, it's not only the government, but the the people of a country too. And some other countries that are less tech oriented, maybe less penetration of, even Web 2 and cell phones, whatever. I think that's the more people are open to tech, the more they are interested in new things like that. So obviously we'll have more success in places where they are tech oriented than less tech oriented.
Mm-hmm. When you think about the tech side of it and like adoption of tech side of it, are you thinking about the reporting side of it being the harder one because like there's no like reporting done in this way today, or is it more like on the crypto side, or kind of both actually?
Well, I was referring more to access to the internet and access to basically smartphones and those kind of access, not necessarily crypto.
Yeah, so it would be the reporting side, I think, primarily is where we're witnessing that, evolution. One angle that we didn't talk about is the capacity to plug in entirely other verticals to that core validation mechanism. So, for example, we talked about a forest app, a forest dashboard that's tasked with collecting, measuring, and reporting forest-based data and sending that to the group of validators on the network. But that same logic, that same architecture applies to mangroves, applies to conservation, could be applied to agriculture, could be applied to other forms, assuming that there's a sufficiently scalable and easy to access method of collecting data pertaining to these problems. So when we think about the long term of OFP, we're envisioning a strengthening network of validators over time, as pretty much every network of validators grows, right? That was the case with Bitcoin miners and Ethereum miners and near validators with staking wars 2 coming up and whatnot. So we're growing the validator base of OFP. And then as we're growing the validator base, we're hopefully connecting additional verticals for additional value creation. And for example, for the case of mangroves, the carbon sequestered by mangroves, blows the best tropical forests out of the water, depending on the type of mangroves that you're talking about. So the interest in these solutions is very, the potential market gets very deep when you start to think about what else can plug in and kind of who can saturate this kind of ecosystem. That's kind of maybe the big takeaway is like we're thinking of this on a multi-decade, multi-vertical time frame. To basically completely sweep the floor, so to speak, of nature-based solutions and create a new paradigm for how they're reported, validated, and monetized.
Mm-hmm. And to clarify, so those validators would be then same kinds of people who work on the initial problem. They'll be applied to all of these other verticals that you're adding on. Mm-hmm.
And there'll probably be a couple of new validators that have to come in for some of the smaller details to kind of retrain the kind of validator chorus, if you will. But in general, like a lot of the validators that we're seeding are remote sensing companies, companies with an experience in evaluating data and kind of checking that data. And then as you get a stronger network of people who can do that, it's easier to kind of accommodate and recalibrate them to just looking at different data sets. And, the real catch here, I always kind of bring this up, is like the real key unlock is that the data is uploaded many, many times from the same project. So we're not talking about a prediction market where it's one time resolved, done, it disappears, and it's never again brought up. We're talking about the same set of land for 25 years, data coming in every 6 months, and you're just training people to be able to check for the anomalies as that data is coming on over time, right? So it's kind of very different from traditional resolutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what I would also add here is that we haven't really talked about this, but you can think about remote sensing, plugging in also on our side, either with a partner, an organization that does that already, providing extra check or a premium, but we could also develop that with a partner inside OFP. There are multiple solutions to not have only a static system based on what we've built now, but an evolving system creating stronger and stronger methodologies over time, eventually cheaper and faster for people to use. So I think that's a really key value proposition, because we've seen a lot of companies in the space trying to go down the same route as we are, but only with remote sensing. And I think it's difficult. Of course, it's a good value proposition, but it's difficult to actually get people onboarded in this, because usually the way it's been monitored is a black box. So they have the tool, and then out of the black box they say that there's that much value from the land, could be carbon or whatever else. So it's very hard to actually evolve together as a community with a system like that, because the black box is going to stay a black box. And then also on the project side level, if you work on the ground with people, with communities, you need to keep them engaged. And remote sensing is not keeping them engaged at all. You need to have them, responsible for what they do, responsible for the data, responsible for being there for 20, 30 years. If you just ask them to plant trees or restore ecosystems and then you kind of disappear, I can bet you that in 10 years, 20 years from now, there is a high risk that the restoration is not there. It's not happening. So it's super important to have this frequency of checks coming from the ground. It doesn't mean that it has to be high level, but it needs to be there.
Yeah. I think from kind of going back high level again, also thinking about crypto projects today and the environment we're in, the one thing that I would stress, especially through this experience of doing OFP and kind of looking and understanding a lot of other projects today, is cryptoeconomics is really becoming important. And, in the past, it was the market was in such a state and the kind of hype was in such a state where you could launch a governance token or, raise in a certain structure and say, oh, we'll define the cryptoeconomics later on and we'll figure it out and we'll be good. I think what I've learned from this process and many others is that you should be, as a crypto builder, you should be prioritizing your cryptoeconomic design as you would prioritize your architecture or code design for the product. So the cryptoeconomic design is as important to make the product successful in the long term as whether you're building in Rust or Solidity or whether you're building on Near or Solana. And that has not really been kind of pushed into the mindsets of both the builders and even the VCs. I mean, it's quite amazing the level of interest that a VC will take and then not really even understand what asset it is that they're purchasing or what the value accrual of that asset is. So if I could, one thing for future builders to take away is it's like really stress test, be extremely thorough and diligent on making sure that your cryptoeconomics has serious value accrual. And you don't have to just do what everybody else does because they think that market psychology will make it go a certain way, right? Like so many people said, oh, OFP should have 1 billion tokens because the more tokens there are, the more market psychology will perform to buy up the token and pump the price. Well, it always depends on the nature of your product, where your value flows are coming from, things like that. And I would actually encourage a lot more experimentation in that space. Like, don't feel confined to follow past models. Work with your thinkers and your mechanism design people and your economists to come up with new models and don't be afraid to kind of experiment and throw them out a little bit, because we do need that innovation in this space for where things are going. And I think it's a big bottleneck right now. There's not enough people focused on that type of problem. So.
And when you think about cryptoeconomics, I have, I guess, 2 questions. One is, how did you yourself learn over time through different experiences about how to even think about cryptoeconomics? Imagine like somebody listening to this and just have no idea where to even get started. Mm-hmm. Crypto is just notoriously like hard to get started with. And then how did you apply all this learnings then? So like in your cryptoeconomics here in Open Forest?
Yeah. So cryptoeconomics, I think it obviously is very product dependent. And so like what I would always like, essentially what you're doing with cryptoeconomics is you're asking, who are the stakeholders involved in this product? What is the value created from this product? How is this value going to flow into this product now and into the future? And that really defines how you should think about constructing this cryptoeconomic system. Because a lot of times people say, oh, this is how the value is going to flow now. For example, an ohm or an ohm fork where you're doing rapid emissions now. But then when you think into the future of how does this play out down the line, oh, it's relatively irresponsible. We're emitting a ton of tokens and there's no mechanism to burn or buy back or sustain this emission. So those 3 pieces, right? The stakeholders involved, the flow of value and the accrual of value, and then the time-based component of how are we going to layer that in to either juice it up at the very beginning of the system and then plateau it later on so that it, ends up declining, or it'll be a slow roll where, it goes up slowly and stays going up. Like, these are, I think, the major considerations. It's still a very young, industry niche, if you will. Like, I think most of what I've learned has just been through trial and error and working on a bunch of different products, right? So like worked on the flux economics, looked at the near economics very closely, a lot of the different L1 economics. And for OFP, I think the real catch really had to do with the time component. So for example, construing the economics to make sure we have enough runway to build this system and to get this system launched, but at the same time, not flooding the markets with tokens all at once or in an unsustainable way, so that the system can basically be sustainable over the long run. And then the real value accrual of OFP, which kind of saves the day, thankfully, has to do with the potential of being able to implement a carbon credit. So if you are creating a new asset of value on top of an existing platform, you can tie your utility token of that platform to the new value or the new asset that's being created. And that's kind of, I guess you could say, your cheat code for OFP, because in a game, in a metaverse project, and things like that, it's much more difficult to harness value if you have one token and it's money's coming in. It's a more complicated construction. So I think that's, to put it ugly, that's the complex world of cryptoeconomics. And we do need more clarity. We need more mentorship on how to think about these problems. And I think more than anything, just to focus on the varieties of different structures that you can have. Like, you don't have to have a token right at first. You can layer in a token, that kind of thing, I'd say. Yeah,
Yeah, that was very helpful, I think, for...
Yeah, I would just add, if you think about, working with nature or, the environment as a whole, you have to think long term. It's super important to have a plan, not only for, okay, I'll do I'll launch a product and I'll have, a token economics that work for that. But, what's going to happen to your project? Where are you going to be in 10 years, in 20 years? And that long-term perspective will help you to think about a model that is sustainable, because it's the most important thing is you want to, basically with the environment, of course, there's an urgency with the climate, but you want to actually do that in a sustainable way. So climate change or other environmental issues are not a quick fix. Sorry to say that. It's not a quick fix. It's hard. It's long-term, and you have to be committed. So try to actually address that issue when you do think about setting up a project in the blockchain, like in this perspective.
And I have one more question. What would be the advice for entrepreneurs that you guys have?
I think to be honest, this is going to sound a little unconventional, but your team and your network is like your family in crypto. In crypto, you're building in an ecosystem, and you're building in collaboration with lots of other products. You're not building necessarily a single siloed product that offers a one-dimensional business model that's bringing in value and not talking to everybody else. So making sure that the team that you have to launch a product with is the team that you are comfortable with, that you can work well with, and that you trust for the long term, and really, really kind of looking at the development of your product as tied in with the overall development of the ecosystem is above and beyond, I think, the biggest thing that crypto entrepreneurs need to kind of understand at root, right? Like, just like simple examples, Proximity Labs does a lot of DeFi stuff on Near. If you're launching a token, you're going to have to be interfacing, or you're going to be talking to DeFi related or token launch related people. You need to have good relationships over there, right? If you're dealing with storage, there's storage solutions coming. You're going to need to have good relationships there. You're working with the foundation. You're going to need to have good relationships there. So getting entrepreneurs to think less of me and more of we is, I think, like super, super important. And I like to say it always, like, crypto really breaks God complexes. Like, you have these like generations of entrepreneurs where it's like, oh, look at Elon and Mark and Jeff, and like these are, these gods of whatever they're in. Okay, in crypto, we're trying to create constitutions. We're trying to create groups of people who are coming in and doing things all together, where you are just one piece of a larger process. And that's the whole point. The system and the process actually is greater than an individual business. That's more, of a personal philosophical approach. But for founders today, you will be shocked by how much advantage is gained 6, 9, 12 months down the road on the financing side, on the development side, on the network side, from just building a good network and playing as a team player with your team and the ecosystem as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And last question I have for you is, where can people learn more about Open Forest, and also what kinds of people are you recruiting today who can get involved overall, like with you guys?
Fred, do you want to talk about the website plan?
Sure. So with Mainnet, we have a completely new revisited communication coming out, a new website. Go ahead, explore everything you can on the website. There are ways to be involved as a project, ways to be involved as a validator, ways to be involved as a contributor. And if you have specific skill sets or interests, then probably it's best to reach out directly to us or to one of the team members.
Yeah, I would also say, just to add to that too, like, we're really trying to focus on recruiting and building a new generation of green entrepreneurs, of climate-focused entrepreneurs, and hopefully, OFP provides enough robust tools to be able to do this. So if you're interested in connecting a potential vertical to OFP, reach out to us. We're happy to work on that solutions design with you to make it optimal. If you're interested in working with local communities to onboard projects to OFP, reach out to us. We're happy to connect with you. If you're interested in future financing of projects and getting in on the new carbon economy, reach out to us. None of these things are, directly tied into the core building of the ecosystem, but they're all roles that we're hoping young, passionate people, will come in and kind of inhabit as we try to grow this ecosystem. So definitely reach out to us on email, on the website, or Telegram. It's helpful. So
cool. Yeah, thank you for joining today. That was very insightful and definitely a use case that isn't discussed that often, I feel like, in Web3.
Yeah. Thanks, Sasha. Great to see you, as always.
Thanks a lot, Sasha.